Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of this exciting tutorial where we head first into Unity. And what we are learning is the basics of Unity. Last time we learned what was in the file drop-down window and how to utilize those tools. Now we're going to learn a little bit about shortcut keys and ones that we will use very often or very frequently, and the edit drop-down window for the most part. So I'm going to go into and hit on my hierarchy. Now, I hit my light, or actually I'm going to create another game object. So really quickly, going to go a little ahead of myself, but there's a reason to it. I'm going to go to game object, 3D object, cube. I'm going to double click on this cube. Okay, and there's a reason to it. So in the side window, we have shortcut keys right beside it, and all these windows have shortcut keys assigned to them right here. You can read them if you forget them. But these are very similar to Word, where Control D is duplicate, Control V is paste, Control C is copy, Control X is cut. And you might not use shortcut keys in Word as often, but it is very important that you learn these shortcut keys for Unity development, or if you're going into even programming, because it is time consuming to go over and hit edit, undo, create cube, or whatever. And the reason why is because when you're sitting at a professional Unity design firm or whatever, and you're wanting to learn and absorb all the knowledge, you're probably gonna see someone, use shortcut keys where they hit T and then they move, like this, and they edit the object like so, Control Z, and then they hit E to rotate, per se, and and then they do all this, and then they do W, and then they move it like that, and then they duplicate and stuff, right? So we're going to learn all these keys. So I'm going to undo all these lovely movements, and we're going to go from the beginning. So so we're not really going to use Control Copy and Control Paste and move it, right? That takes a little too long. So what we're going to go and do, we're going to learn that Control Q is pan, right? So you move around. So that's what I was talking in the first step, where you can do with your middle scroll bar thing, or a mouse scroller. That is what Q does. W is what gives you the X and Y axes, right? Like so. So you can move these out. Then you have E, which is rotate, which rotates the object. R, which is scale, so you also can scale in each direction, or you can scale uniformly like so. And that's not as important, these tools, because typically, especially if you're just moving things around, editing, you're not going to have this. You're just going to use these, this is the pan tool, the move tool, the rotation tool, the scale tool, and the rect transform tool, which you might want to use, one day, but mostly it will be for GUI, right? Most of the time you'll just be using something of these three. And I like to have mine always on move, because I typically move things around more in the scene than just pan around or rotate objects. And so that kind of covers Control Copy, Control Paste. Again, there's a link in the references folder that takes you to a link of all the lovely shortcuts inside of Unity. Let's go here, and let's go to Preferences. Now, Preferences is where you have all your Unity preferences. Now, you typically don't want to edit this. You can if you want, make it fancy. But it is per Unity project, which means that just because you edit this, it's not going to really affect gameplay. It's not for the project itself. It's just for you. Here, and then you have the project settings, which is one of the most important places you'll go. because it has everything that is in your project settings. And this is actually what everything exports with. So you have the tags and layers, and you have your layers and you have your tags, which you will use in game. Things tagged as player, things tagged as enemy. You will use this quite a bit. You might not go through the edit and then project settings window, but you will use this quite a bit. You will use the input manager, and the input manager, it has all of the buttons and has, you know, your left and right and what that does for key binding. So horizontal, you'll see that it's X. So if you plug up your Xbox controller joystick to your computer, how does Unity know that when you're pushing your joystick to the left, it goes to the left, or to the right, it goes to the right? Well, it does it with the input manager. If you do other functions, it won't catch that. So that's really important to set up here. Typically, you will use the basic ones. I've rarely added things to the input manager or remove things from the input manager. I like it. It's really nice when you have huge projects for multiple platforms. So let's go back to edit, project settings. You have the audio, which we're not really going to play around with at all in this tutorial series on course, but of course if you play, you can kind of put your mouse over it, and you'll get a little quick description of what each thing does. So I'm going to go to edit, project settings. One thing we will play with is the graphics and quality. So quality is just phenomenal when you want to optimize. Whether it's how many shadows are getting casted or the quality of the shadows, it's all done here. For this project, we're not really going to play around with it, but if you ever saying, hey, my game is running slow, what can I do? First thing, go to the quality settings, lower down the settings, and that's, you know, full res to 8th res, hard shadows to hard shadows only. You don't have to edit too much. You don't have to, you know, blend, wait, and if you don't know what it means, you know, Google it. You can research it a little bit more. Bone count for each mesh, skinning, like that's way out of this basics course, but I recommend that you do get familiar with it when creating a huge Unity project, because it is the first place you should go to optimize any Unity project. Now you're going to go to edit, project settings, and we're going to go to graphics. And here is quite literally, you go to a Unity project, and you can have many Unity programmers, but very few actually use the built-in shader settings. And this used to not be as nice, where it had these added, the legacy shader diffuse. It used to look a little different, but Unity 5 kind of helps you out with that. And if you use a custom shader, now one day you might even grab an asset from the Unity Asset Store, and when you export the project, there's purple everywhere. Like, I'm talking, the trees are purple, the ground's purple, the sky's purple. What's happening? Well, it's probably that the shader was not exported with the project. To add a shader, you simply increase the count, 7. Hit enter, it'll duplicate the last one added, and then you add that shader, and that's how easy it is. And let me tell you, from having projects out in the asset store, that even when you can be nice and you can have it in the resources folder, people don't know how to do this, and I get contacted and they tell me what's wrong, and I tell them to go to the graphics settings and add the shader, and they're totally confused, and I have to do a little picture setup. So don't be that person. Learn where the graphics settings are and where the shader included shaders are here, right? And then you have fog mode, which you can add fog to your scene, so you can edit all of this and fun stuff. But again, it's not we're not going to play around with this at all because we're not really building that interesting of or elaborate of a scene. Let's go to project settings some more. I know we're getting so excited about project settings, and we're going to go to the editor project settings. And this is, again, if you're doing something with hosting, if you're doing anything with compression, first thing, go to the editor settings, because you have compression mode, JPEGs, PNGs, resolution, downsize. You can downsize the resolution in the Unity remote. So if you plug up your phone and things are loading, you can change that here. Version control, which is nothing for anyone that's not using GitHub or Asset Server or anything like that, and stuff like that. So this is completely way out there. But it is important to know what these things are for future reference. If someone says, hey, change your version control because you're gonna upload this to Git, you're gonna know where to put it, and that's the editor settings. One thing I do want to highlight is in the editor, when you go to preferences, here you go to external tools, and here I have Visual Studio 2015 installed. And this will be very important for later on down the road. Unity 5 does come with Visual Studio. If you are a Mac user, it does not. You will have to use MonoDevelop, which none of them are better than the other. All of them will write code. Visual Studio does catch errors earlier, so there's less of checking the console and stuff. But again, we're not really doing too much hard code, so you'll be fine either way. And typically Unity will alert you, so it won't be a huge shock that something's not right. So that you'll have the SDK and JDK, which is for Android export. Again, past this project tutorial, but you need to know what these are if you are planning to build a Unity build on Android. It is in your preferences, and JDK is also in your preferences. And if you're planning to, but you don't want to start, you didn't start your project right now, go ahead and install these and place them so you won't have to do it later. And that's about that in the editor window. And now in assets and game object, again, we're going to go through game object, and then we're going to go into the basics of coding. And if we need anything else, I will go over it as we're going through. But the first couple of things are important. Unity background for when starting a project, just from the get-go. So see you in part 3 of this introductory course to Unity